Welcome to the Chapter 5 lecture. In this chapter, you will learn how to describe the most common types of website organization, describe principles of visual design, design for your target audience, create clear, easy-to-use navigation, improve the readability of the text on your web pages, use graphics appropriately on web pages, apply the concept of universal design to web pages, describe web page layout design techniques, and apply best practices of web design. The design of a website needs to appeal to the people that will use the site, also referred to as the target audience. The look and the feel of the kayakdoorcounty.net site on this slide is completely different than the look and feel of the web design and instructional technology site, as each of these sites have a different purpose and are designed for different audiences. How visitors move around your site and how they find what they need is largely determined by the website's organization. There are three common types of organization: hierarchical, linear, and random, sometimes called web organization. Most websites use a hierarchical organization similar to what is represented in this graphic. The home page and the first level of pages generally represent the site's main navigation bar. In this example, the product page would have a sub-navigation of Category 1 and Category 2. It is important that you understand that these boxes represent pages on the website. When you are designing a hierarchical organization, you want to make sure that the organization is not too shallow. Too many choices lead to a confusing and less usable website. You want to use information chunking. Research shows that adults typically can keep about 4 items or chunks of items in short-term memory. So you want to be aware of the number of major navigation links and try to group navigation links visually into groups with no more than about 4 links. In this example, the hierarchy is way too shallow. On the other hand, you want to be careful that the organization does not go too deep. This results in many clicks needed to drill down to the needed page. The 3-click rule implies that a web page visitor should be able to get from any page on your site to any other page on your site with a maximum of 3 clicks. A linear organization, as depicted in this graphic, is used when web pages need to be viewed in a specific order, one after another. This would be a common layout for something like a tutorial, a tour, or a presentation. Some websites might use hierarchical organization, as we saw on the last slide, for the major navigation, and then perhaps use a linear organization for one small section of the site. Random organization has no clear path and is generally found only on artistic sites or sites that strive to be different or original. Depending upon who you talk to, there are generally 6 to 9 principles of design. The book addresses 4 of them as being repetition, contrast, proximity, and alignment. Repetition involves repeating one or more components throughout the page. Contrast can be used to emphasize the difference between page elements in order to make the design interesting and direct attention. There should always be good contrast between the background color and the text color on a page, and proximity refers to placing related items physically close together on a page. An alignment is used to help create a cohesive web page. When applying the principles of alignment, the designer organizes the page so that each element placed has some alignment, either horizontal or vertical, with other elements on the page. Repetition, contrast, proximity, and alignment are 4 visual design elements that can greatly improve your web page designs. It is important that you design with accessibility in mind. Providing accessible websites is the right thing to do. In web design, different individuals benefit from web pages that are designed with accessibility in mind. In the design process, you might be targeting one specific disability, but in effect are benefiting many different people. We include alt text with images for the vision impaired, but it also might be helpful to anyone when images don't load. Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act requires electronic and information technology, including web pages, used by federal agencies to be accessible to people with disabilities. When writing for the web, you want to avoid long blocks of text. Large blocks of text and long paragraphs are difficult to read on the web. Try to use bullet points, headings, and subheadings, and short paragraphs when writing for the web. You also want to design text that is easy to read. This can be accomplished by using common fonts that are found on most computers. Keep in mind that research shows that serif fonts are easier to read in print, but sans serif fonts are easier to read on the computer screen. Use appropriate text size and be aware that fonts display smaller on a Mac than on a PC. You also want a strong contrast between text and background and want to avoid wide areas of horizontal text. There are studies that recommend between 50 to 70 characters per line are best for readability. When adding text and hyperlinks, avoid using click here. The book discusses how users know by now what to do on a link, and you don't need the words click here. But equally important, users want to know where they are going when they click on a link. And as with anything that you do, always check your spelling. The right color scheme can attract and engage your website visitors. The book talks about using a photograph that captures the mood of the website and using the colors found in the image. That is a great idea as long as the image is going to remain on the site. Imagine if you design the entire site around one image and then the client asks you to substitute in another image at the end. But even if you are using an image, it is important to have a working knowledge of color theory and its use in design. When implementing a color scheme, choose one color to be dominant. Use other colors in the color scheme as accent colors for things such as headings, subheadings, borders, bullet points, also known as list markers. When you choose colors for text and background, sufficient contrast is needed so the text is easy to read. You can use one of the following online tools to verify contrast. Here are some resources to help you choose a color scheme. There are many other options available to you on the web as well, but these are just a few that the author of the textbook has selected. You also want to be sure that the colors will appeal to your target audience. Younger audiences, such as children and preteens, prefer bright, lovely colors. Young adults tend to prefer dark backgrounds with occasional use of bright contrast. If your goal is to have the site appeal to everyone, you want to stick with neutral white backgrounds with splashes of color to add interest and highlight page areas. And if you are targeting older audiences, light backgrounds with well-defined images and large text are appropriate. When using graphics and multimedia on the web, it's important to remember that file size matters. The file size should be as small as possible with acceptable display quality. This will help your pages load as quickly as possible. If your pages take too long to load, your visitors will leave. Try to limit web page documents and associated media to under 60K on the home page. When designing your site, be sure to take time with the design of your navigation. You want to make your site easy to navigate. Provide clearly labeled navigation items in the same location on each page. The most common places for the navigation are across the top or down the left sidebar. Vertical navigation on the right side of the page is less common because it can get cut off at lower screen resolutions. One of the first steps in designing a website is the wireframe. The wireframe is a sketch or blueprint of the web page. It shows the structure of the basic page elements, including the header, navigation, content, footer, and image locations. The wireframe doesn't generally include the content, but rather it shows where the content will reside on the page. There are several things you want to keep in mind when designing a page layout. One of those is to place the most important information at the top of the site or above the fold. Above the fold is a terminology that came from the newspaper industry. When newspapers are on the driveway or in the stand, whatever content is above the fold is what the user sees first, before even opening the paper. You want to follow that practice in web design as well and keep the most important information near the top of the site where it is easily available to the user. You also want to use adequate white space to increase the readability of the page, as well as make sections stand out. On this slide, the content is there, but it is a little boring. In this example, the content is the same, but columns have been used to make the page more interesting and easier to read. And columns of different widths interspersed with graphics and headings create the most interesting, easy-to-read pages. The book discusses two commonly used designs as a fixed layout and a fluid layout. Fixed layouts are exactly that, fixed, and do not change based upon the width of the browser. These are being done less and less with the explosion of mobile devices. However, they are the easiest sites to design and provide the most control over the design and is what we are currently creating in this class. Fluid websites, or liquid layouts, are designed to take up the same proportion of space on different screen sizes. Responsive web design involves styling the content to look good in all viewports, whether it be a computer, desktop, tablet, or smartphone. Most websites today are responsive. You can tell if a site is responsive by making the window on your desktop computer smaller and seeing how the layout of the page changes. The website mediaquery.es provides some great examples of responsive websites. In this class, we will be making our fixed sites responsive starting in Chapter 7. This link, terrymorris.net/best practices, provides a list of best practices for web design in areas of page layout, browser compatibility, navigation, color and graphics, multimedia, content presentation, functionality, and accessibility. It's worth checking out. And that wraps up the Chapter 5 lecture.